Hank, there's starting to be a lot of rumblings that this Alabama coaching staff is a bunch of superstars, and they are going to close fast and furious. What's the latest on where Alabama stands with just under a week to go for National Signing Day?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, Nick Saban's hired guys that are really talented recruiters and as well as talented coaches, and I think they're it's certainly showing, considering over the course of the last few days, Alabama's kind of, I mean, obviously they're out on the recruiting trail visiting guys in this last week that they can, but there's been a number of new prospects offered too, and I think we've learned a lot of new names as well, and I think that just goes to show relationships that some of these guys had with recruits at their previous stops, and kind of translating over to Alabama now. I mean, we've seen them, I think they've handed out 4 or 5 new offers in the 2018 class, at least in the last few days, and that's obviously kind of what they do every year, just to have some backup options in some situations. But overall, I mean, there's been nothing but positive returns from these recruits on campus, or from the recruits we're talking to about meeting with these coaches off campus at their schools. And Bama's making a pretty heavy push, and I think it's going to pay off come next Wednesday.
Yeah, it looks like Alabama's making a lot of headway with a lot of defensive back recruits. But one of the areas to me that's kind of glaring that I think Alabama, maybe Nick Saban feels better because of what happened with all the injuries than I did. But Quay Walker and Vernon Jackson seems to be the most unstable guys in terms of their commitment. And that seems to be like they're the only 2 guys that we've really been after. Have we made any other offers or anything in terms of the linebacker position?
Yeah, that's certainly the case. I mean, Quay and Vernon don't seem to be the most stable of commitments, and I don't think anybody would be surprised to see them exit the class here in the next few days, although they both are still Alabama commits. They haven't formally decommitted or anything. We actually talked to Vernon 2 days ago, the night before last, and he said he still plans on signing with Alabama. Obviously, that can change in a matter of an hour or two, but that's the case right now. But just to have a backup plan, Alabama did offer Jalen Moody, a 3-star linebacker out of South Carolina. They've been talking to him for a couple of weeks. Pete Golding, one of Alabama's new assistants, has been recruiting him, and they're going to get him on campus this weekend for an official visit. And I think he's a guy that if we see Quay or Vernon leave the class, or maybe just one of them leave the class, I'm not sure what the scenario would need to be, but if they are in the market for a linebacker, I think he's the guy that would join the class. He's rated a 3-star. He's not the highest or highly rated guy we're used to seeing, but if you watch this kid's tape, Jalen Moody, who I'm talking about, 6'2", 225 inside linebacker, he's just a really talented kid. We talked to him last week, and he said he models his game after Reuben Foster, who's his favorite player. And I'm not going to say he's a Reuben Foster, obviously, but I mean he's a pretty hard hitter. And I think if Bama did have to go that route and land him, I don't think it would necessarily be such a bad thing. I mean, he's a really good-looking player, and we'll see what happens with him. But, yes, Jalen Moody, I think, is a name to watch. They talked to another linebacker named Dax Holyfield, a 4-star inside linebacker out of North Carolina, who they've known about for a long time. They offered him right after signing day last year, but they went and saw him twice, I think, this month. And there was talk about him maybe taking an unofficial visit this weekend. I talked to his coach yesterday. That's not the case. I don't think he's going to. So I think the one name to know at linebacker at this point, we're still seeing a lot of offers go out right now. I mean, anything can happen, but I think Jalen Moody is the one name to watch if we see Quay and Vernon decommit.
All right. Still on that track of potential decommitments or commitments that, individual we thought were going to be locks for Alabama. Bobby Brown still scheduled to visit Texas A&M, and he decommitted from A&M, but is going to be taking that visit. And sometimes with these kids, man, that last impression is a lasting impression and can change minds. And then also Malik Langham appeared to have had a great visit at Florida. It talked about Mullins in that experience, and he's going to his favorite school this weekend in terms of the Auburn Tigers' favorite school growing up. What's the likelihood that one of those two flip, and does Alabama have a contingency plan if one of those guys or both of those guys go somewhere else?
Yeah, I think Bobby Brown is probably it's funny because Bobby Brown's the commitment and Malik Langham's not, but I think Bobby Brown's the one that people should be more concerned about potentially flipping. I'm not saying they should be. I think he ends up sticking in the class, but obviously, I mean, it's not a warm sign to look at and see your one of your top commits visiting an SEC West school the final weekend before signing day. So I think we should keep an eye on him, Bobby Brown. And obviously, we saw Alabama put out another offer to a defensive tackle earlier this week to Moro Jomo, another kid from Texas, kind of a late riser. I mean, he has a ton of offers, but kind of a kid that I think a late riser. He's gotten several offers. I know Texas, Oregon, all the in-state schools over there like him. So we'll see what happens with that. I think, like I said, I think he'll stick. But I mean, he has a history with Texas A&M. He's really close with their defensive ends coach, Terry Price, and obviously the proximity to home. So you can't discount him visiting the Aggies. And then Malik Langham, he is visiting Auburn this weekend, which was his childhood favorite. But, I mean, I really don't see him not ending up in the class at this point. I know there's a lot of talk about this being a tight race now that Auburn got into the mix, but honestly, from what I've been told, I think Florida is the biggest threat to Malik Langham if there was a school that's a threat. I mean, I think he's leaning pretty heavy to Bama. He's maintained his leader. I think he's just doing these visits to kind of just enjoy the recruiting process. I think Bama is where he wants to be. We'll see. I mean, that's my opinion. But I don't think Auburn's as much of a factor in this whole thing as people are making it out to be. I think Florida is probably the biggest threat for Malik. But again, we'll see. Crazy things have happened in recruiting, and obviously he is taking a visit down to Auburn. So we'll watch that. But I think in the end, we still see Bobby Brown and Malik Langham in the class, but we'll see. And Bama has that contingency plan with offering Moro Jomo, and we'll see if they get him on campus this weekend. He's set to visit Oregon, but I mean, obviously they can change plans on a whim. So we'll see.
All right. Speaking with Hank South 247 Sports and Bama Online recruiting analyst, Hank got a couple questions coming in via Facebook Live, Martin Houston Personal there. Jason Waltrip asking, what's the deal with the 3-star? I think he's referring to Eddie Smith, DB, that Saban really likes, on par with, if not better than some of the 5-star DBs that are remaining.
Yeah, I mean, he's just been one of those kind of hidden gems. I mean, he was committed to TCU for a long time. He decommitted last month, and his recruitment kind of just took off. Talking about Eddie Smith, the 3-star cornerback from Louisiana, 24/7 Sports actually has him rated a 4-star. They've always been a little bit higher on him than the rest of the industry. But he took an official visit to Alabama last weekend. And I think this one's, in my opinion, is Alabama's race to lose. I think it kind of was after they offered. He was looking for that offer. A lot of kids, they're looking for the Alabama offer, and I think in his case it was the one that he really wanted. Obviously, he's considering Mississippi State and Tennessee as well, but I think if signing day were today, he'd pick Alabama. After that official visit to Tuscaloosa last weekend was his last, so they obviously had the last impression on him. And yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't argue with that Eddie Smith is just as high on the board as some of these 5-star corners. I mean, I think Patrick Surtain and Tyson Campbell are probably the guys they want in the class. But I mean, Eddie Smith is right there with the rest of that group, and he's a really talented kid. And I think landing him could prove to be down the road a pretty big steal late. Being able to get in with him in mid-January when they offered him, to being able to land him 2 weeks later. So. Yeah, Eddie Smith, I think, would be a big addition if they were able to get him, which I think they will.
All right, so even with Isaac Taylor Stewart saying Alabama has a high chance to sign him, and then, of course, they won't Surtain Jr., Campbell, But this Eddie Smith guy, I got to go check out some film on this guy, because if Saban's on you, he's seen something in your game that separates you from the pack. Especially, of course, he say he didn't look at the rating, so this may prove to be the case when there's what? Have there ever been this many 5-star from the same position grouping left on signing day that no one really knows where they're going to go?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I not in my time covering Alabama recruiting. I mean, I truly thought that the early signing period was going to make this kind of a boring regular national signing day, and I don't think. I mean, I've been doing this for 3 years now, and this is probably the craziest signing day that's coming up. So,
it is pretty interesting. Like so many, like 70% of the top 300 or something, according to one ranking service, off the board. But of the ones who are left, it's like there's a lot of big names. And with that said, a lot of big names being left on the board. Alabama in on virtually all of the unsigned top 50 or so players in the position groupings that they're interested in. Alabama's on their list in their top 2 or 3 teams. Larry Miller wanting to know, where does Bama finish, in your opinion, with the 2018 class in terms of ranking?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think Bama has it in them to finish probably. I think the highest they could go is number 3. That could obviously change if you land 4 more 5-stars, which, I mean, we'll see what happens. But that would obviously probably bump you to 2. I mean, Georgia and Ohio State have kind of separated themselves from the pack in terms of their score on our ranking system. I think number 3 is easily within reach. I mean, I think Texas right now is like 290, and with a few commits, Bama could surpass that. But I mean, if Alabama really closes strong, they land. If like the stars align and they land Patrick Surtain, Tyson Campbell, Nicholas Petit-Frere, and all these guys. I mean, it's certainly, I think, within reach. But I think maybe something would have to happen to Georgia as well. I mean, if Georgia weren't to land Tyson Campbell, but Georgia's going to take, I think, 2 or 3 more guys. So obviously their ranking is going to go up as well. So I think it's hard. It's hard to get to number 1, but I think it's well within reach to get to number 3. And I think it'll certainly be a top 5 class.
All right. Now, really quick on the explanation of how the rankings work. Alabama's only signing 22 to 23 players. Could this be as high a class, though, if he were to, as you say, the stars align, per player ranking as Alabama's had? And even though it won't be necessarily the number 1 class, could this class be one of his more special classes down the road?
Yeah, I think so. I know that the per player ranking, I'm not looking at it right now, but I know it was even when Bama was everyone was in the summertime when they were outside the top 20. I mean, the per player ranking was still like 92 or 93, and that was good for, I think, the number 3 or number 2 class. So, yeah, I mean, if they land these elite guys going down the stretch with like Surtain, Campbell, and Petit-Frere, and those, and maybe even Elijah Griffin, the other 5-star corner from California, I think that would certainly put him in the race for maybe one of the top classes per player ranking. I think right now they're in the top 5 of that. I'm not sure exactly what their number is, but it's high. And I think it could be a really special class. And considering what Alabama has gone through this year with staff turnover and kind of just, well, I mean, it wasn't late start. They were all along. It's been kind of just evaluating, making sure they're taking the guys they want to take. It was a smaller class, so they weren't just taking the guys to take them and then have to maybe part ways or go a different route later in the year. But yeah, I mean, to have this many needs and to have all this new staff, I think in the end, I think this class will be strong one way or the other, but I think it will be one of the more memorable classes. And I think there's a lot of guys in this class that don't get a lot of credit for how talented they really are. I mean, if Slade Bolden, Eddie Smith, if he ends up in the class, and then if Vernon Jackson sticks in the class, I think those 3 guys are. I mean, they're all 3 or 4 stars, and they're not underrated. They're good players, but I think some of these guys that aren't getting enough credit for how talented they are, and I think, and then if you add in obviously like the Surtain and these other elite guys that are on board too, Not saying Surtain is on board. I'm just saying Surtain and the guys they signed in December. I'm sure I would get a Twitter question about that later. Yeah, I think it could certainly be one of the more special classes going forward, and a good kind of springboard to 2019, which I think has the potential to maybe be one of the best classes ever, as it's looking right now in terms of who they're involved with.
Well, that's interesting. I was going to ask you, but you gave me the little tease that I was going to ask you about. I've heard this 2019 class from a national standpoint and from the state of Alabama is really a special class, an elite class, especially the state of Alabama in the quarterback position is kind of crazy with what Nix, Tyson, and Tagovailoa. So just to name a few, let me as we wrap up this edition with you, what's kind of the process for the next few days leading up to signing day, and then of course I know we'll have a big breakdown next Thursday because it'll be after all the letters hopefully are in next Thursday. But what can our listeners expect from you guys over the next 6-7 days?
Yeah, obviously the staff is still busy. They're out on the road getting their final visits in, so we'll be covering that. And then this weekend won't be as big of a visitors weekend as we've seen the last 2 weekends. Obviously, they've already had the majority of their top targets on. There'll be a few visitors. Like I said, Jalen Moody's expected, and we'll see who else comes. I know there's another defensive back expected in Leon O'Neal, kind of a late add. So we'll see what happens with him. But we'll be covering that, and then the kind of the final build-up of the staff out on the road. And then starting on Monday, it's just kind of the last opinions. We'll be getting as much as we can what we're hearing, and it'll be a lot of good VIP coverage over the next 6 days. So it's certainly a great time to join our site. And then on Tuesday night, I know we'll have our class projections, and then Wednesday is the day. So a lot to come, and it'll be a fun ride.
All right, one quick question I got to ask is quarterback. We get White, Purdy, or Foster?
Ooh, that's tough. I don't think it'll be James Foster. But between Brock Purdy and Brevin White, I mean, I think if you checked out an update on our site earlier this week, I know Greg Biggins, our California reporter, said Brevin White seems to be the guy that is the guy they have the committable offer out to right now. That's what it appears to be, and he's still kind of making up his mind whether he wants to flip to Alabama or stick with Princeton. So I mean, I can still see it being both guys. I'm really not sure yet. I mean, I think Brevin White's seriously considering flipping, so I think either one would not be a shock. If I had to pick one, my gun to my head, I'd probably say Brevin White at this point. But we'll see.
All right, follow at HankSouth247. See if he gets any breakdown, any breaking news on Brevin White versus Brock Purdy. That and much more you can find at Bama Online Recruiting and 24/7 Sports. Thanks, Hank. We'll catch up with you next week.